Welcome to today's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And today it's myself, Jerry Eisenhower, Cheryl Eisenhower, and Brandy Biswell on. And today, as always, we got a really great subject matter for you. And today's subject matter is all about a challenge that's going across the United States right now. You know, when we look at it, one of the big challenges we think is recruiting people, which it is a challenge. But there's a second challenge today that's probably affecting companies even more so than the recruitment, and that is the retaining of our workforces. Because in today's world, what we have a world we're operating in today where people have much shorter careers. And as a manager, as a business owner, it's to your advantage that you learn to retain the people that you have. It's just like money in the bank where you're earning an interest on these people. So what you want to do is learn what is the secrets, what's the gold nuggets of retaining the present team that you have. Because in order to have that dream, you got to have a team to get there with you. So today's guest is one that Brandy is familiar with, knows, and recommended her for us to do an interview with today. So I'm going to turn it over to Brandy. Brandy, tell us a little bit about today's guest that we have that's going to be on shortly.
Yeah, today we're going to be speaking with Barbara Allen. So Barb comes with 30 plus years in the construction industry. So as a woman in the chimney industry, I identify with that, being in a male dominated world. She also spent 10 years as a union carpenter. She's done everything from being a general contractor to being out in the field to management. And so she's going to help us hopefully today to get some ideas on how we can keep and retain the current talent we have. And I think a lot of that goes into getting our employees to open up to us and speak their minds to us and let us know if they're happy or if they're not. And so it's going to be really exciting.
Well, great. So, Cheryl, we did a little opportunity to speak with Barbara backstage right before we went live. So, what's your feelings on today's content and what we're bringing to the table for our listeners today?
Well, it touches a nerve, let's say, something that I used to do. I came from a construction background. So I can empathize with the fact of the male dominated world. It's changed considerably since I started in the 70s, but there's still room for growth. And with her concepts, it's not just for a female dominated, it's for both male and female because all companies need to retain.
That's it. So stick around because right now, what are we calling this time in our history in business economics? It's being referred to as the Great Resignation. And if you can learn the gold nugget processes of how to retain your rock stars, just think where you're going to be. Because again, it's going to take a team to help you get to the dream. So stick around. We'll be right back and we'll have Barbara Allen on as our guest today. So, Brandy, I'm going to let you start this off today since this is a person that you know a lot more about than myself and Cheryl, okay?
Very good. So Barb, this topic is very timely because I'm actually losing an employee today. He's my head repair guy. When he came to work for me about 3 years ago, he had been in the automotive industry. He wanted to go to automotive school, and they, for whatever reason at that time, could not send him. And so he came to work for us, and now he has the opportunity to go to automotive school. And so he is leaving. And so he's been with me for 3 years. He's my head repair guy. That's a big deal to have to replace that position, and it's very costly. One of the things that I know that I talk a lot about are stay interviews rather than exit interviews. So trying to do a stay interview and elicit from an employee, are they happy? What makes them happy? What's their best day at work look like? What's their worst day at work look like? I guess I'm always concerned, though, if they're being honest with me. And so what is your definition of honest feedback, and how would I go about gaining that honest feedback?
No, I think that's a great question. Because I think so many people a lot of people do reach out to their employees to try and get honest feedback. And I had lunch with a friend in the industry earlier this week, and she'd made the comment that even on reviews, she had asked them for honest feedback of her. Not only they're reviewing themselves, but reviewing her. And she said she only got good things, and she knows there's more. And there's feedback that is honest, that they do feel like you're doing a good job. But then there's that deeper level of honesty that really makes change within the company. And that's the type of honesty that I think you really need to move forward and make changes, positive changes in the company.
Very good. Thank you.
So that's good. So Cheryl, let's let you take the net. This is Ladies' Day. We've got a lady that eked out her existence on a site as a carpenter, and you're a person that was a former wallpaper installer and drove a tractor trailer truck, believe it or not, across the country. So I'm sure you and Barbara can think a lot alike. So what's your first question for Barbara?
So, what kind of honest answers are you actually looking for? What do you think an owner or manager is willing to hear as far as honesty goes? Is there a limit that they don't want to step over?
Yeah, I think for some people there is. Some people don't, they simply just think that they know the best about their company, and they don't really want the honest feedback at all. And I think the challenge for those people is starting to understand that as you are a manager, and as you move up in a company, or you are the company owner, you get further and further away from the daily intricacies of the company. And you're supposed to, right? I mean, you're supposed to be delegating, and you're hiring great people underneath you. But if you don't trust that they know more about the day-to-day stuff than you do, then you are not wanting that feedback. But there can be little things in a company that are going on that you're just so disconnected from, because you're not maybe part of those morning meetings anymore, or you're not understanding how this new safety protocol actually is causing more issues. Then maybe it just needs a little tweak. And needing to understand that those issues from your employees means you have to want that feedback. I think there are a lot of people out there that want feedback, but Cheryl, like you said, there are people that just, they're not open to it. And I think if they just started to open the door a little, they would be surprised at what they learn and how it improves their company and their processes and their relationships with their employees.
Okay. So this is my question for you, Barbara. My research shows me, and in dealing with this particular issue of the Great Resignation, that in today's world, we're seeing an average career now as short as 2.7 years. Many years ago, people would go to work for companies, and it was for life, 20, 30, 50 years, whatever. But they would take one job. I know we're in what's called a cotton mill town here in the South. And for years, we would see people that worked in the cotton mill from the time they started working, sometimes as young as 12, 13 years old, from many years ago when child labor was in effect, until the day they collect their Social Security. But today we're seeing this much shorter term. What do you think is driving this shortened career span that we see in today's world?
What do I think is driving it? I think that's a great question. And I think millennials have done a lot of that driving. For me, I'm a Gen Xer. And I entered the industry, as you said, thinking I'm going to go in, I'm going to have one career, and I'm going to work at that company for my entire career. And I stayed at my first company for 20 years. And when I did make the decision to go to another company, it kind of messed with me a little, because I just thought I'm not supposed to jump companies. But what I think we've seen from the later Gen X's and the millennials coming in is that they really want an opportunity to be part of a company, and where they have an opportunity to be part of the decision making. They feel like they're truly valued, and they're not just there to do what they were told, but they're hired for their opinions and their insight. And I think a lot of companies have struggled to be open to how is a 25-year-old, why am I taking their opinion? Why do I have to ask them for their opinion? Why do I have to listen to it? And I think that they have started finding companies that are willing to listen, and they started jumping. And I think that they started moving around because they weren't getting what they needed. And for those of us who came in at a different time, it really wasn't about what we needed. It was, is this a job I want to do? And am I doing it well? And am I getting promoted? It wasn't so much about, are they listening to me? And I think that culture has changed, and people are moving more often to get the opportunity to be heard and feel important.
No. And, I've often heard it said, I'm a baby boomer, I'm an older generation. And it's often said that when we were younger, if we were told to do something like and jump, our question was, well, how high do you want me to jump? And in today's world, to back up what you're saying, now the question is, well, why am I jumping? And now we've got to explain a lot more of what we're doing here, of how this process works. So back to you, Brandy, it's your turn.
So when I used to do annual reviews, I don't do them anymore. When I used to do them, I used to have a scale of 1 to 10, and I would ask the employee to come to me with, it was a whole sheet they filled out, but the last question was, how likely are you to stay with Flues Brothers over the next year? And I would ask them, like, 10, I'm absolutely not leaving, and 1, I'm leaving tomorrow. And anytime I got a 10, I was like, they're gone. They're not going to stay, because I didn't believe it. Nobody's a 10. I wouldn't even be a 10 if I was working for someone. If I got a 6 or a 7 or an 8, I'm like, good, I'll probably have them for a couple of years. When we work with our coaching clients, I often know before the owner does that they're going to lose a CSR, because they feel more comfortable opening up to their coach than they do to the owner of the company. If one of those people is watching, like, what is your advice to them? How do they have that conversation with the owner or their manager? How can we make it comfortable for them? And how can we make it comfortable for the manager to have those crucial conversations? Because especially, and also, this is like a double question. And also, does gender play into that? I know we're really not supposed to talk gender in today's world, and we're supposed to be more binary, but I feel like just men in general aren't the feely touchy type people to have those conversations. They're not used to that. Whereas me as a female owner, I'm more comfortable around those conversations.
No, I think there are a couple components to that. One, I think it's about developing the relationship with your employee that elicits the deep, honest feedback that you're looking for. And 2, I think it's the questions that you answer, or the questions that you ask. And I think too many times people ask yes or no questions, 1 through 10 questions. And those are not getting you the kind of feedback that you need. If what I did in my in my reviews, the last 2 questions I would ask my employees, one was, what is your favorite thing about this company? And allow them to expand on that. And I'll be honest, the thing I heard the most at the last company I was with was, we love the camaraderie. We love that it feels like a team. It feels like a family. They loved the company culture. That was the number one thing. And the retention was very good for that reason. But then I would ask the question, if you could change one thing about the company, what would you change? And sometimes they'd be a little caught off guard depending on how long they had worked for me. But I spend a lot of effort developing relationships with my employees that allow them to feel comfortable telling me the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I know I can't get better unless I hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so asking that question, what would you change? It's amazing. The answers can be as simple as, why don't we have a dishwasher? I spend 2 hours a day cleaning up dishes in this room. And all of a sudden you think, well, that's silly. A dishwasher is a couple $100. And what could this person be doing for us that's way more valuable than that? Or it could be, I don't feel heard in this company. I don't think we're headed in the right direction. And that kind of answer just piques my interest. Tell me more. What have you said that you feel you're not being heard? And sometimes you find that What they haven't been heard about is they just weren't given the whole story. It had been discussed when they brought it up. It had been discussed in leadership, and we were working on it, but we had not effectively communicated to the people in the company that this was being discussed, and it was in the background. And sometimes it simply hadn't been heard. Whether somebody thinks they've said it well enough that it got their attention, and it just simply didn't. But I know for me, I have always wanted feedback. And I remember one time when I was still working in Houston, and my boss sat me down for my annual review, and he gave me my review, and I just looked at him, and he's like, okay, it's not like you not to say something. Why don't you have anything to say? And I said, this is the most vanilla review I have ever received. It didn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me how I can improve. It doesn't, I mean, I like hearing that I'm doing a good job, but I know I'm messing something up. Tell me what it is. And about 2 weeks later, he came back to me and he said, I'm ready. Let's sit down. And he had done a 360 review where he asked my architect team, he asked my owner, he asked the people above me, he asked people underneath me, he asked my peers, and he gave me a 360 review. And that told me he cared about how I was doing, and then he wanted to know my feedback on him. And I started to feel more comfortable giving him that honest feedback because I felt like he did it for me. He gave me the good, the bad, and the ugly from a deep review, and it made me feel important. And then I could start giving that back to him. That was a really long answer, and I don't know that I answered all your parts of your question.
No,
Brandy.
you did. It was a long question.
It's a long answer.
And I can relate because when I was working at the hospital, I remember I went in for one of my annual reviews, and my manager said, I want you to know I spent the longest time on your review because I knew you would want a lot of details. So I can relate to that. And I'm always surprised. One of the things I do with our clients is I listen to their phone calls, and I grade their CSR's calls and then give them that feedback. And I remember when I first started doing that, I'm like, oh, they're going to hate me. And instead they ask for more, and, oh, well, can you send me that call? Well, what could I have said instead? And so I'm always surprised by how hungry people are for feedback.
Mm-hmm. They are. And I will say I have had negative experiences with it as well. And that's hard when you really want someone to improve and you're giving them the real feedback and they don't want to hear it. That can be difficult, but like you said, it's rare. Most people really want that feedback.
So Cheryl, ball's in your court. What would you ask Barbara?
Well, just so you know, Barbara, we do a lot of SWAT meetings with our clients. And Jerry or whoever's leading can usually pull things out of people. Why do you think they're comfortable saying it in the meeting with the owner there, but not just saying it to the owner?
Oh, that's a great question, because I think my experience has been more so that people are afraid to say something in a meeting, but they'll say to each other one-on-one outside the meeting. But back to your question, why are they okay in front of the owner, but not directly to the owner? I think that when it comes to real change that needs to be made, there is more than one person in the room that feels that change needs to be made. And more than likely, it ties to what I just said, where people are talking about it outside the meeting. The people in their peer group, maybe above them, maybe below them, but they are already talking about this outside of the leadership meeting. And so when they're in that meeting with the consultant and the owner, they know they're going to be backed up. They know that if the owner says, well, wait a second, I don't really do that, there's somebody else in the room that can say, well, you actually do that, and hold them accountable. But when it's one-on-one, if you have not developed that relationship with your employee where they feel like you're really going to listen, why are they going to give you feedback? It just falls on deaf ears, and there's no one else in the room to back them up and give additional examples. But I would say to people who are listening that want to give more feedback to a boss in particular that struggles to take feedback, when you say, I feel like this needs to be improved, I would make sure that you have 3 concrete examples of how it needs to improve or why it needs to be improved and how it can benefit the company. If you don't have the backup behind it, it does tend to fall on deaf ears, particularly with someone who just you haven't developed the relationship with where they want your feedback.
Yeah. And that, Cheryl, to add to what you're saying about the SWAT meetings, because we all 3 know that these work very, very well. But what we're also doing is we're setting the stage for this SWAT meeting. It's not a fact that we walk into a room and everybody pours out their woes. It's a matter of setting the stage, telling the people that are in attendance, okay, this is your opportunity. It is your opportunity because here's the true fact. You guys and gals know things that are the weaknesses in this company that the owner probably does not realize. So I need you to talk, and I want you to be real free to talk today. And those things, when you walk out of the building in the morning and head to your first job, those things that you just complain about. You go down the road and you just got to let it out. That's really driving you crazy. Well, this is the opportunity to lay this on the table, to lay it on the table. I think also one of the things that we did in our SWAT process that has helped tremendously is I ask them all to write it down. Okay. We don't I used to run a SWAT and I would have my flip charts there and I would ask, okay, Joe, what do you see as the weaknesses? Okay. And what I found out was they weren't digging deep into their brains. So now I ask them, I need you to list for me, what are the strengths of this company? What separates you? And I also even take it further and I say, what makes you unique? And because people say something, well, we're honest, we're ethical. And I said, okay, but who's not going to say that? I need to know what are the strengths that separate you from anybody in the marketplace. And then as we go into the weaknesses, and I have to tell them many times, you can have a strength that is also a weakness. To give you an example, and Brandy, you can verify this, you can have the best software program in the business, okay? And you're paying big bucks for this software, but then you're not utilizing the software for all the things that the software can actually do. Okay, so when you look at these different things, but what happens in a SWAT meeting, and this is usually the telling tale, I always instruct management, this is a time for your people to talk. I need you to sit here. You've got to be prepared to take it. I'm not going to let this get out of control, but you got to be ready to take this. And here's an interesting fact, Barbara. I've had people that would say, this is a weakness. Okay. So we then build the strategies for each of the weaknesses. So I tell them, okay, you've got this weakness. Tell me more. Tell me what we need to do to solve this. Tell me what our strategic plan is. And they'll sit there and start talking. And then all of a sudden, we get this really interesting answer. Well, it's really me. Now, that came because they were able to speak what they felt. They were able to actually get it out. And once they got it out, what happened is it just eradicated that stress level in that group tremendously. So, that's a process that we have found works tremendously well. So anyway, Brandy, I'm gonna skip. I don't have another question. I just want to put that in. So it's your turn next for the next question.
Well, Barb, you mentioned relationship building. So what can I, as an owner manager, do to build that relationship with my employees? What does that look like? How do I go about that?
Yeah, and it can be different for different employees for sure. Different employees want a different relationship. But for me, one of the things that I always did was I tried to build community with my team members in a way that was, I'm going to say, not associated with work. So, I was a superintendent for many, many years on construction projects. And what I would do on Fridays, I would have team lunch. And that was, we would pick a place, we would send the lowest guy on the totem pole to go pick it up, bring it back, and we would sit in the trailer around the table, and no one was allowed to talk about the job site. They weren't allowed to talk about the company. They weren't allowed to talk about work. They were just talking about themselves and their spouses and their kids and their hobbies. And you get to really know someone. And there is a fine line between becoming friends and getting to know your employees. And you've got to be careful with that line. But once you start to know where your employees are coming from, the struggles that they're going through or the successes that they're having in their personal lives as well, you can start to build this relationship. And when you start to divulge information carefully as well about yourself, they start to feel like there's a connection there that's more than she's my boss, he's my boss. It is they care about me more than the task that I'm doing for them here. And I think it's so important to develop that personal relationship. But aside from personal, I think developing the relationship also has to do with follow through. When someone brings an issue up and it just dies and goes nowhere, people start to not trust in the relationship that you have. And you don't have to, by any means, respond with action to everything someone brings up. But it does require a response. A response sometimes is a couple days later to say, hey, I've really thought about this, but from what I see right now, this does not make sense for the organization for reasons X, Y, and Z. But when we get to here, maybe it does. Or I've really thought about it. It's going to be on the agenda for the next 6 months for us to figure out, so that they can at least know that you've really thought about what got brought up and you're following through with it. What really kills those relationships is when it just goes silent. When they hear crickets about what they've been brought up, or it's discounted, yeah, I'll get to it later. I think that really hurts the relationship. And the last thing I would say is making them a priority. I think that too many times managers get busy, and I think most places you will read that it's important to set regular meetings with your employees. I read somewhere once every week, and there's no way I think most managers can meet with their employees once a week, but even if it's every 6 months where you meet with them, or it's a once a week meeting, whatever it may be, making it a priority. But I think too many people, especially in today's work culture, with as busy as we are all with the things COVID has done to particularly the construction industry and others, appointments get canceled or they show up late. And when you show up late to a meeting with an employee and you do that on a regular basis, or you cancel on a regular basis, or you just don't show up, that sets a tone for the relationship. So I think the summary is it's three things. It's one, it's getting to know them on a personal level. It's making them a priority, and then follow through when you do have conversations so that they learn that they are important to you, and so are their ideas.
I agree. And Jerry, Jerry, you and I are going to do 2 SWATs next week. We'll actually be in Houston at one point next week, Barb. But I think that's where, on those SWATs, where it's so important for them to take action on those weaknesses, because otherwise the employees are just like, what are we doing here? We did this last year and nothing changed.
Yep, and that's
Yes.
biggie. That's one of the big things we hear is, and that's what I school the people on, management. If we come out here with strategic resolutions, then you got to move on. You got to move on. If you don't, you're going to lose your credibility with your people. So Cheryl, you're next at bat. What's on your mind?
Okay, I'm going to allocate this to weather. Okay, we're sitting around, we wish it would rain. Then all of a sudden, it breaks loose, it rains for weeks. So let's take that into what we're talking about. You opened the floodgate for the feedback to come. All of a sudden, the feedback gets overwhelming. What do you do?
I think that it's important, if that happens, to set appropriate timing for feedback, so that it becomes, hey, we have a monthly team meeting, we have a monthly company meeting, whatever, and this is the best place to bring your feedback. Of course, if it's emergency feedback, I mean, that there would be rare of that, but help people understand that you can most effectively deal with feedback when it comes at a planned time. And that can be their review, that can be weekly or monthly meetings, but trying to establish a time that, and if you're new to getting feedback, I would recommend that you start it that way by saying, hey, we're going to have a monthly company meeting, and that's going to be your opportunity to give some feedback. And then when you go to that next month, you can show the progress that's been made or decisions that were made on those, and it opens the door for more feedback. But I think you have to start setting it, and hey, I really appreciate this feedback. Let's put a pin in it until the next meeting. You've got to make sure that they understand it's important, but we've got to schedule when we're really going to sit down and go through all of this.
Yeah. As you're talking this, Barbara, and going through my mind, and it goes along with what Brandy shared a while ago about, how do you build this relationship? And I think part of the thing is you've got to know what your people's dreams are. When you look at it, we're baby boomers, your generation X, we got Zs, we got millennials, we got all these different generations. And the desires of each of us is different as you look at different age groups. But, as I look at what I'm going to call successful managers, successful CEOs, such as the president of Southwest Airlines, who his people took out a full page ad in USA Today and talked about how happy they were for Herb and what he did. Or if I look at the CEO of Costco and how he comes in and he's on a first name basis, he encourages all of his employees to call him by his first name. Or we had a gentleman on here we interviewed a while back. His name was Doug Wing. His dad's name was Hal Wing. He's passed away at this point, but he built a company called the Little Giant Ladder Company that was awarded by the state of Utah for the culture and excellence that they have within people. So part of this is understanding the dreams. Yes, like you said a while ago, it's really tough on a manager to meet with everybody, but it doesn't take that long just to say hello, just to give people a smile, just to say how you're doing today, or to know someone that's going through challenges, such as, okay, like Brandy had her house flooded last week and went through some challenges with COVID. And if Brandy was employed, say, hey, are you and Jeremy doing okay today? Did you get the flood issue done? Is there anything we can do to help you? So what's your thought about this, about understanding people and being part of this solution?
I agree. I think it ties back to what I was talking about with the lunches. Those lunches allow me an opportunity to get to know them, but it goes beyond just a set time once a week or once a month. It's taking that time when they walk through the door to say, hey, it looks like maybe you've had a hard morning, what's going on. But when people start to realize that you care about them, that's when they start to care more about you. And when they care about you more, they care about your company more. I think there are so many ways to do that, but it doesn't have to be forced. It can just be as simple as saying good morning. I think that one of the struggles that I've had in the past is when you walk in a company and you walk by several people and no one even says good morning when you walk in. It doesn't feel like somewhere that cares that you even showed up today. It's not that hard to look up from your computer and say good morning, or from the other end of the trailer, you heard the door slam. Oh, so-and-so must be here. Good morning. How was your drive in? It doesn't take that much to show people that you care. And I heard one time, and I don't remember where I heard this, but the number one thing people love to hear is their name. And just simply saying, good morning, Brandy, glad to hear you came in today, whether it's joking or seriously, just people care that you notice that they're even there.
Okay. So Brandy, you're back up at bat. What's your next one?
Yeah, I have like questions, stories, everything. I love the name thing because that's one of the things I teach in my CSR classes. Most of the companies in our industry have this fancy software that if it's a previous customer, it pulls them up before the phone even rings. And so you know who's calling in. And so that's one of the things I teach is making sure that you're greeting them by name. That makes them feel important. I know when I go to get my nails done and I walk in, they're like, "Oh, Brandy, how are you?" I probably go back there because they know me. They use my name. So I love that. One of my questions is, and kind of goes into a story. So today, my daughter, she works at a country club, as you probably know, and she is a lifeguard. And then this winter, she's going to be working in the gym. So she had to interview with a different manager. So she went in and she had told me that she was going to ask for a raise. So she calls me after the interview and I said, "Did you ask for a raise?" And she goes, "No, I'm going to email them." And I think she's of that generation Y where they're more comfortable over like text and email, and even our customers nowadays are more comfortable booking their appointments rather than picking up the phone. I think face-to-face communication is always better, but are there those instances where maybe we should send an email or a text? Or I know when I worked at the hospital every year, we would get this survey asking us to give feedback. And I'll be honest, I felt more comfortable giving honest feedback on the survey because it was anonymous. And I know in years past here, I have sent out survey monkeys because we are a small office and I wanted to see if I could get more honest feedback by sending out these survey monkeys. But is there ever a time where we should use email or text or survey monkey?
To get feedback or for creating relationships or both?
For feedback.
Man, I'll be honest. I am such a in-person kind of person. I am not a fan of written feedback. I mean, you've got to do it on reviews, right? But as far as asking through a survey, I'd like to touch on the survey real quick. So I think anonymous surveys can be great. What I have found though is so many people, when they do anonymous surveys, they also attach a list of qualifiers at the beginning. Are you male or female? Are you in the office or in the field? Or what age group are you in? And I strongly urge people, if you're doing that, I get where you're coming from, but I strongly urge that those questions are not required to be answered. Because in my situation, through my entire career, if I had answered those questions, it was no longer anonymous. I was the only female in the field between that age group. They knew they were going to be my answers. So I would not fill out the survey because those were required to be answered. So they weren't getting my feedback that way. But I think surveys can be a really good way to do it. But I think that there's so much lost in the survey. You get a quick answer without really knowing what's behind it, what made them say that particular thing, and you don't know who said it. And so as a leadership team, I've sat there with the leadership team and reviewed the list of comments that came back on the surveys. And for starters, people try and figure out who said what, but then you're just kind of looking at it thinking, well, where were they coming from? And there may be 9 people in the room, and 2 of us think it came from a position of they were part of this, and 2 of us think it was this. And so I don't think that surveys give the kind of information that I'm suggesting that you really need to make improvements and changes in your company.
You know, Brandy, as you
Makes
talk,
sense.
I got a theme song for you, Brandy. As you were talking this, the theme song from Cheers, if you remember right, what it
Oh
said, where,
yeah.
where everybody knows your name. That was in the Cheers theme song. When Norm walked in the bar, everybody, hey, oh, hey, Norm, and he goes back and drinks all his beer and all that. So maybe you're onto something there.
Yeah.
So Cheryl, what's your next at bat?
Okay, we've talked about surveys. We've talked about calling people by their names. We've talked about, the relationship building. Are there any other areas that a manager can use that we may not have discussed that would open up this honesty?
What have we not discussed?
think you froze.
I think she did too. I was just checking if it was me.
It usually is you, Jerry, freezing.
So I'm not froze this time. We froze Barb. She's in a heck of a position right now. You can see. So, Brandy, while she's unfreezing, hopefully, what have you taken out of this so far?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's something that you just have to practice because I feel like it is uncomfortable to ask for honest feedback. And I feel like we don't experience that as much as being coaches because the people that are coming to us, they know they want feedback. They know that they're signing up for that. But I think there's a whole population out there that it is very uncomfortable for them. And I think it's like the first time you fire somebody, it's never completely easy, but it gets easier the more you do it. One of the things that I wanted to say when I was researching for today, I found in Sweden, there's this company, and actually you can buy these machines now that are used all over the world. But there was this company that they put in what they call a feel good meter. So they put it by the door, and at the end of the day, when you leave, you press like green if you had a good day and red if you had a bad day. And they were saying they had the statistic that they had like 90% green for a long time, and then all of a sudden it went down to 40% red, or like red was the predominant that people were hitting. And so they were able to go back and look at the change in the organization that had caused that. But I thought, what a neat concept. Like you're just walking out for the day. Yes, it was a good day, or no, it was a bad day. And, then for the management team to be able to go back and look at that data and say, well, what was different about yesterday that everybody had a bad day, but they've had 4 good days this week. I found that fascinating. You can actually buy these machines. I'm thinking about buying one and installing one.
That's it. So, Cheryl, what have you pulled out of today's episode that you think is some valuable gold nuggets?
Well, part of the value is people in our generation have a really hard time doing this as opposed to as you drop down through the other generations. And I think we all have to do it. We've changed a lot. Coaching has, I think, helped change me and you because we came from the background of why should I do it? Because I said so. And so we weren't into the relationships, but neither when you were the employee did you expect that answer. And so it's a big change. I would say the older you are, the harder it is to do. Brandy's at the breach of the timing when it's much easier. And I can get from some things she's saying, she's not 100% comfortable with it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. I don't think you ever can be. Maybe you can. It's not me.
Yeah. We come from the generation of it's my way or the highway. Let's get real. That's what it was. Brandy, your dad was a prison guard. In some ways, it was very similar. I used to watch those people go in the cotton mill at 3, 11, and 7, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, 11 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock in the morning, the shift changed. And once they went in, they had to walk past the guard. And I always wondered, was that guard to keep people out? No, seriously. I don't know if it was to keep people out or it was to keep people in, into that prison. But this is what I've learned today, which I think reinforces the principles that we've operated on with our clients, which is you got to build a relationship with your people. You got to ask their opinions. You got to put them into a way that they feel free to put it out. Our friend Chuck Roydhouse just posted saying, it seems people are reluctant to ask for help because of foolish pride. All conversation with a coach or consulting is private. So to be honest and move forward, improve and have less stress. And that's exactly right.
I agree, yeah.
And what you've got to do is be willing to listen. I think that's one of the hardest things I can do. Like I've got a SWAT set up in a couple of weeks with a client. And the client said the following, well, I really shouldn't be there. And my answer was, I'm not going to even repeat the first 2 words out of my mouth, but yes, the last time I did one for your company, you weren't there. And it ruined the whole effect of the day. So yes, you're going to come, you're going to participate, and you're going to listen and learn from your people. What are they looking for? Okay.
And I heard from Barb. She said that she's trying to get back in. Her dog unplugged the laptop and it wasn't charged. So she's rebooting. But yeah, Jerry, and I think that also brought to my mind, we as the employer set the example. And even in talking about when I asked Barb about building relationships, it brings up for me, That's why I'm usually here before my other office gals, ladies get here. I try to be here at the end of the day when the technicians get here. So that way, if my door is open and if they want to come in and have a conversation, or I can ask them about their day and how it was. But if you're not leading by example and you're absent, then that's the example that you're setting for your people.
Well, we've got a guest coming up in a couple weeks. He was supposed to be the other week, and we had travel restrictions. I was traveling. We just had problems. Brandy, you were going to be gone that Friday, so we didn't do it. And then his air conditioning broke down, so it would have been a bad day for him. So we're going to reschedule this. And this is one of Tommy Mello's employees.
I
And the
love that. I'm
question,
excited.
right. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a person from the other side, okay, not from the management side, rather from a millennial service technician of what is it that makes Tommy Mello. It's like I talked about Herb Kellerman from Southwest Airlines. His people wrote a full page ad. Can you imagine, Brandy, anyone we know that their workforce would actually run an ad, a full page ad in a major newspaper talking about how great they were as a leader? I mean, you look at that, that would be something. If you saw that, if you woke up this morning, Brandy, and your people had done something like that, how high would you be riding when you walked in your office today?
Oh, very high. It's like I posted a picture on social media the other week. When I came back from our vacation, they had put like welcome back on Jeremy and I's doors with all these balloons. And I loved it. It was so welcoming back. And Jerry, talking about Southwest, it's an old book now. Years ago, I still have the book though. I read the book. I think it's called Love Works. And they named it that because Southwest is based out of Love Field. And it was an entire book on Southwest culture and how come, and I know, Jerry, you're not a fan of Southwest, but I love Southwest. And how come when you fly Southwest, their pilots are making jokes and when they're giving the, instructions and things. And it's just, it's a whole different environment and a whole different culture, I guess, than a lot of the airlines. And the book was on that. So if you've not read that book, I highly, highly recommend it. And thank you, Chuck, for your comment. You give me way too much credit.
Well, you do a great job. So Cheryl, is there anything you would add in before we end today's episode?
I think everybody just needs to sit back first and take within themselves what they do, because get comfortable inside yourself and then face your employees with that. Set up something. I liked the meeting that she said she had where you could not discuss work. I don't think we do enough of that kind of thing. Even if we do something off site, I think it eventually comes back to work. We just can't keep it out. There needs to be a penalty for mentioning work. And so I think that would make a huge difference in a lot of companies.
And I did training 2 days this week. And yeah, we were training all day. If you looked on social media, you can see the photos we did. But I had a couple different companies there. But what we had at the end of the day, we had dinner together. And during the dinner, we actually didn't talk anything about that. We talked about baseball. A lot of these guys were Baltimore Oriole fans. So we were talking about baseball, and I was asking them about which sports they liked the better. It's kind of like Kansas City. Randy, are you a football fan or are you a baseball fan, or does it vary depending upon the time of the season?
I'm neither, but I'll go to the stadium for a hot dog.
That's it. Well, same thing. We're not big baseball fans, but we found out the local ballpark has a really great buffet. If you come in and get their buffet, and so it's a nice dinner, then we kind of relax and watch the ball game. The only problem was we were going to go last night and there were no seats. They had done sold the ball field out, and again tonight. So, Brandy, what would you add in before we end today's episode? What have you picked up from Barbara today?
Yeah, I think just it's a good reminder. I think we know it, but we need to be reminded of how important it is to have that relationship with our employees and not to fear that relationship. There she is. She's back.
Okay. So Barbara, so you'll know, we've been talking about you the whole time you've been off. We've been talking. So what we've been talking about, though, seriously, is the gold nuggets you brought out here, the wisdom you have, and what you've shared with people today. And I was just asking Brandy and Cheryl both, what did they get out of here? And from me, it's an aspect of understanding your people, developing a relationship with your people, understanding that your people got to know that you care. Leadership is a form of sales, okay? And one of the definitions of making effective sales is you got to understand your customer. And that's what I teach in the sales course when I teach it, that leadership is going to make you a better parent, a better child, a better everything that you do, and knowing these kind of things and knowing your people. So before we end this, tell me what your closing thoughts would be, Barbara, and any other additional gold nuggets that you would share with us.
Well, and Jerry, I would also ask her to share too, like if somebody wants to get in contact with her after the podcast, how do they do that?
Certainly. Turn your mic on. You're muted, Barbara. Look down at the bottom where it says mute and click.
This is the fun of being live.
How about now?
There you go.
Oh my gosh. So I'm just going to clarify here. So I live in a 1930s house that does not have the ground plug. So I have the extension ground plug thing and then the computer into it. And my dog walked by and just pulled it out. And then when I brought my computer back online, it decided it was going to do an update. So I'm not technologically challenged, but my dog was apparently done with this. So sorry about that. Looking over my notes here real quick to see if I have anything. No, I think the only other thing
Uh-oh.
I would answer that I had to do is to simply go to their employees out of the blue when they're thinking about doing something different. Oh no. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh boy. So
you froze
sorry.
for a minute.
Okay. I think the other thing people can do is to go to their employees out of the blue for just changes and just simply to say, hey, Brandy, we're thinking about changing the way that we do this. What are your thoughts on that? Like just a one-on-one, letting them know that you're considering a change and you're interested in their feedback about something. Shows that you care. It's just going back to that same principle about making them see that they're important and their opinions are important. So I think that's a big theme of the whole thing. So that's the only other thing I would really add that we hadn't really touched base on.
Okay, so Barbara, like Brandy said, if someone want to get in contact with you, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Barbara Allen, and then I also at this time, all I have is my email address, which is the number 1, BarbaraKAllen@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to really appreciate you taking your time out of your day for this. I think you've delivered some gold nuggets. I think there's some things that if the employers, the managers that are on this, listening to this, both on the live and on the replays, can definitely put to work for you. So we appreciate you joining us this week for this episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, sponsored by our company, CBC Success Group. If you need to talk to someone and see ways to improve, if you feel like you're challenged, if the chaos has got you up against the wall, you see our email addresses right on front of the screen in front of you. Reach out to us. We'll be glad to set up a call with you, and we'll be glad to hear what your problems are. We can give you our input, and we can see maybe we're what you need to fit your way through the chaos and maneuver through the challenges that affect you every single day. So with that, we'll look forward to you joining us next time on the next episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network.